Welcome. My name is Christine Denaro, co-chair of the Warner's Pond Task Force, and I'm calling this public meeting to order at 5 p.m. This meeting is being recorded, and a video link will be posted to the task force website in a few days. I'll now take a roll call of task force members present. So maybe we can just go around the table. Sven, we'll start with
That'd
you.
be up here. Malcolm Bryant.
Keith Hannon. Mark Howell.
Bill Cremeza.
Christine Denaro.
Jeff Collins. David Owen.
Ann Clifford,
Bert Collins.
Delia Kay, Rachel Freed, CBI.
Toby Berkman, CBI.
Great.
Anyone online?
Oh, right.
I'm online. It's Liz Morrison Howe.
Good.
I'm en route right now, but I am online at the moment.
Great.
Very good.
And Paul Dawn was here on Zoom. Hello.
Oh, there's
Hi,
Paul.
Paul.
Okay, good.
And we have Jeff here as well.
Yes, Jeff Quick.
Good.
Jeff.
Okay. Very good. Okay, so the co-chairs, CBI and the natural resources staff comprise the agenda to provide the opportunity for the task force members to deliberate and question the options and recommendations from the 2012 Warner's Pond Watershed Management Plan. We felt that it would be helpful for all of us first to share more about our own thinking and specific questions that we have as a group before deciding whether or not and what kind of professional support we may want to bring in. At 6:50, we will open the meeting to public comment as noted on the agenda. And that is it for now from me. Toby, did you want to talk about
Great, yeah, so just wanted to share a few words as we get rolling in the meeting here. So just want to say we're very glad to hear that all the conflict of interest disclosure issues were resolved last night. And that the NRC was able to confirm the continued participation of all task force members. So thank you to all of you who submitted forms on that. We're grateful.
Can I just?
Yeah, please go ahead,
interject for
Delia.
1 second.
Yeah.
I would just like to just take a moment and apologize to the task force. I think that the email that I sent maybe generated some concern amongst the task force members, which was not the intent. The goal was just to provide the guidance to protect the task force members as in your role as a task force. But I think I failed in doing that. So I apologize if it caused any concern, and thank you. Yeah.
One additional thing we just wanted to note as we get into this is to re-emphasize our ground rule around being thoughtful with respect to external communications. Just to say one purpose of the kind of thoughtful communication ground rule is that we we don't necessarily just want all issues immediately entering the public domain without the relevant context, right? Or in a way that could create stress both among the public and among task force members. So this is a public body. We're committed to a transparent process. I think our request to task force members would be, if you have a concern or a question about anything that's going on in the group, please come and speak with the members of the planning team. So, we have, our two co-chairs, right? Bill and Christine. We have a member of the NRC. We have an abutter, right? We have town staff, Bert and Delia. We have two professional mediators and facilitators, Rachel and myself, and we're a resource to you to answer questions, address any concerns. Hopefully you come to us, we can address whatever the issue is, and we don't need to turn something into a larger issue if it's not necessary. We also want to note just our approach towards handling communications that come in to the task force. So moving forward, our approach is going to be to request that members of the public, if they have a concern, to please email the members of the planning team we just mentioned. So that's Bill Cremeza, Christine Denaro, Delia Kay, Bert Cummins, Rachel, and myself. from CBI. The goal there is just to make sure we can efficiently, effectively address questions that come up. Regardless of who people reach out to, generally, we're going to consult with the full planning team. But people are welcome to reach out to whomever they think is appropriate or most comfortable for them. And just to say, we believe this is in line with our prior conversations here in terms of what you all wanted in terms of the role of the chairs. But if anyone has concerns about any of that, we're happy to revisit it in a future agenda item. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Bill to talk through another item on our agenda related to the public records law.
Yeah, this is brief, but it's something that we were thinking about, especially since we've begun to exchange emails, and we want to make sure everyone is aware of this. You probably know, but under the public records law, all of our emails and text messages related to our business, this task force business, are considered to be public record. And it's in the town handbook on page 31. And as a result, you probably know this too, they could be subpoenaed at some point, they could be looked at. So not that we expect anything like that, but just to be safe, we thought you should be aware that you can reduce this by separating out your email for task force business. You can reduce the risk of commingling your personal emails with a public records request. And from what I understand, I haven't done it, but I'm told it's not as cumbersome as it sounds. For example, if you have Gmail, there's a feature that will allow you to set up an account. It would be like, I don't know, Kameza at what's our initials, WP, whatever, WTF.com, at gmail.com. And that would, I could have all those emails come through there, and then could be looked at in terms of public record. So that's the thing. And so if anyone has any questions about it, I just thought I'd bring this up. Good. All right.
Bill,
Back
just
to you.
question. Bill, did you say there is a Gmail address existing right now for the task force?
No, we haven't set it up, Paul, but there is a way of setting it up yourself. You could use any name you want for it, you
Right.
know,
Okay,
but then it would be for this.
got
And
it.
honestly, I don't know much more about it than that. I'm really on thin ice here about how this actually works. We might not need to get some more information about how to make that actually work.
So I can talk about it a little bit.
Oh, good. Here we go.
So yeah, if it uses the town email system or related to the content, and even if you do that, if somebody sends you a message about the task force and they use your personal account or something like that, then you almost need a way to flag it. One way to do that is to blind carbon copy whatever you're setting up or just carbon copy that when you reply so it's captured somewhere. A lot of task forces, and I was going to make this suggestion because it is useful for public records. A lot of boards and committees have a town supplied email address, which is automatically archived for that board and committee, which can then be redistributed out to either the chair people or the staff support or the entire committee, depending on what seems to make the most sense. And normally that address is what's published on the committee's webpage, so that when people go and they want to write in and they have something to say or suggest, they use that. Because it's a town email address, it's all automatically already logged. And then if the reply comes back through that, or reply comes back copying that same address, it creates a good record. It can be cumbersome, and you know, I've been personally involved in some of the records searches that have taken place on some controversial issues, so it is a good idea to think about it. Another way that might require less technology is if you're pretty fastidious about your email, set up a folder and put the emails in that folder. Anytime you see them, text messages are a little bit more complicated, but they also tend to sort of never go away. Screenshots of text messages are a good way to handle creating those records if you need them.
Sorry, also
This might be something where we could just give a brief, email or one pager with some options for folks to consider about this.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
That's a very good idea.
Yeah, well, we can follow up on that.
Yes.
All right, good.
Okay.
Great.
Good.
I guess I just have one question of clarification. It sounds like you're saying the concern is if you're utilizing your personal email for this, that all of your personal email could become public
Yes.
under discovery.
No,
But,
No.
yeah, that's not been my experience on the
No.
corporate
Right.
side.
it's
Sorry.
just that it is perhaps easier to separate out your personal emails from the committee emails, and you just reduce the risk that any personal emails end up being.
Oh,
part
that's
of
right,
that.
that's true.
Right.
Well,
It would go through, even so, it would go through a step where attorneys would look at it and determine.
That's
which
true,
words
yes,
would be-
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And when there's a public records request, you have a certain amount of time to comply. So if it's a smaller sorting and filtering task, then it's easier to answer.
There's another option. Just don't write an email.
Good luck. with
Yeah,
that.
right.
Unfortunately, it doesn't work to stop them from coming in anyway.
Well, incoming is.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, yeah.
Okay, good. So, the minutes of the meeting? So we have the minutes of, do I have a motion to approve the February 29, 2024 minutes? Liz, motion to approve, a second, Sven, any discussion? Excellent, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Oh, gosh. Online, we, agree?
Yes, we're talking about the amended minutes, right?
Yes,
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so then I'll do it again, all those in favor?
aye.
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 Do I have to go around individually, or can we just do it that way?
It's unanimous, I think.
Okay.
It's unanimous.
Any opposed then? Good. Any abstentions? Perfect. So the minutes are approved as written. Okay. And I just want to say one more thing as well then. So as you can see from, maybe you can't see from the agenda, but we have a lot to review tonight, a lot of information. And we just want to say that we do need to end at 7. I guess people have other meetings and whatnot that they have to attend. And so just so that we don't rush through things, if there's something that we don't get to and we need to talk about it more, we will discuss it further at the next meeting. So it won't be forgotten or left off. So don't feel rushed in that respect. Okay. Bill,
All right, so we're gonna start to discuss the 2012 watershed management plan. And this came out of, I think we all know that, our last meeting. We were heading in this direction anyway, and we were wondering whether we bring somebody in, et cetera. As you've heard this already from Christine, do we bring somebody else in? And we thought it'd be better for us to work on it ourselves. A lot of you have expertise, have some sense about this, and those who don't have great questions about the plan. Also, the plan was written at a time when it wasn't advocating for a position like dredging or removing the dam. It was simply laying out the options, telling us what it looked like, what the pond was undergoing, et cetera. So we thought it'd be very good for us to go back over that today. Not necessarily try to seek consensus, although my guess is we might come to agreement on certain of those descriptions or options, and either to accept or eliminate some of them. I hope we do. And then we'll go over and see if there's more research that we need or professional support is needed in certain of the options. So let's begin. And the notion was we would look at the history of the pond, that's in section 1, the nature and extent of the problem, that's in section 3, the management goals in section 4, and then the long-term and short-term options and the recommendations in section 5. We also asked Delia and the team to have available for us some slides which we thought were kind of significant, if I can find them here. One was the what is this? This is the summary of previous studies. So that will come up if you need it. Okay, we have that to be put up if we need it on the display. Also, at least 1, 2, 3, 4 charts that we thought were significant. One of them was the sediment chart, which I thought was pretty important for us to look at. We can call this up at any time to see where the sediment is laying. The second one was the density of vegetation in the pond in 2012. We thought that was significant. Those things you might add, we put that. The third was the the overall depth and direction of the pond, or the water that moves through the pond, and we know it's moving through relatively quickly, we can crawl that up. And then my own favorite, why, I don't know, the area exposed if you did a drawdown. I thought that was a fascinating picture to see what the pond would look like with drawdowns. So those are the four we have available. We can call them up at any time as we go through it. And I believe Toby and Christine are gonna lead us through this part of this. I mean, I'm sorry, Rachel, that's right.
Yes.
Great, all right. I think, Rachel, do you want to start off with section one?
Yeah, so just looking at section one, we've all spent a lot of time reading this, I'm sure, and we're interested in hearing from you about whether you think the information that's presented in the report in this section. We're gonna actually be repeating these questions as we go through the document. What do you think about the accuracy? Do you think that it still today describes the pond? Is there information that you don't understand? Or is there information that's missing? You know, what's your reaction to section one?
Just starting out, okay, I think towards the top, it's been really interesting kind of going through the history, from what a lot of folks have, I don't know, uncovered, but we've just discovered more of what's been written in some other historical reports for the town. And there does seem to be some pretty good evidence to demonstrate that there has been a pond there since the late 1600s. It may not be, the dam that formed it is not in the exact location, but there's actually a lot written about it. And so that has been recorded in some of the notes I have. And there's actually a website that just went live from the Friends group put out, and it's all actually summarized there with citations. So
So this is information that's beyond.
new, because this says it starts in the 1800s.
Right, older than,
Yeah.
okay, that's great.
I guess.
I have a comment.
Sure.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I work with the Historical Commission, and so I actually attended that meeting with the Friends. And, right, so I'm a historian, so I went back through the maps to check the facts, and actually put together like a slide program, just, showing images from the maps over the centuries. And the Historical Commission will be looking at it this week or next week on Wednesday, so that you can see the maps, see the documentation that has been vetted by the Historical Commission, and put that all together. And you'll see that according to the maps, the pond did not exist until, after 1857.
So
But there were previous dams, but they did not create the pond until the mid-1950s.
So that's really interesting. And remember that our purpose today is not to resolve any conflicting opinions. It's to get out on the chart and on the table and before the group. Where are there gaps? Where is there information that you think is not helpful? Because the group is looking at this report and building, right? You're gonna build from the 2012 and move into the other reports and the other information about methods and actions that could be taken. So it's great. And don't worry if you say something and then someone else comes up with something different, that's okay.
I'm just sharing
Sure.
information and
No,
letting the map
absolutely.
speak for themselves.
Absolutely, that's
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
fine. So other comments or thoughts? Malcolm, you had your hand, do you still have a comment?
No, actually, my comment was exactly the same as yours. There have been dams, but no pond until 1950.
So in terms of moving on through section one, yes, that's good.
Yeah, I think the history is very European settler focused history. There's nothing about it, what was there before, what is kind of like, how was nature, say, forming that area, and bring it into context outside of European settlers showing up and putting dams and ponds out there.
Keith?
I just want to just caution, I think, from my experience with maps that are quite old, they're not always drawn very accurately. I mean, there's a lot of errors that can be there, so I just say caution that. I would very much like to see the previous drawings for the pond.
So what, are there other thoughts about the history of the pond, the history of the area that you would have questions about, that you think have, that there are information gaps in this report that you think would be useful to the town
Yeah,
going
on-
forward?
Yeah, Paul,
Oh, and yes, and we have, oh, we, oh,
I don't know who was,
Okay.
I didn't read up there, but go ahead, yeah.
Can you see my hand?
Yeah.
sorry,
Oh.
yes.
Yeah, it's really a question on the term eutrophication. I don't mean to be nerdy here, and, you know, I've been looking at information and data for a while. And I'm wondering if that's a correct term. Only because we do know there's excessive nutrients coming in, excessive sediments, excessive weed growth. But one of the aspects of eutrophication is dissolved oxygen depletion and potential, you know, fish kills related to that. And I haven't seen widespread reduction in dissolved oxygen. And I don't mean to make this an issue here, but I'm just wondering going forward in terms of a goal, I think we ought to be, if that's the right term, Delia, then fine. But there's not a dissolved oxygen problem. It's more of a nutrient and sediment problem, is it not?
So there is low dissolved oxygen, not low enough that the pond is experiencing fish kills, but it is low. And
It's- Yeah, in this watershed management plan itself, there were spots that was low. I don't mean to be to belabor this, but it's just eutrophication in lakes, you know, the main characteristic is their fish kills and very low oxygen. And because of the flow through this pond, we don't see that, you know, that often. But I'll leave that as a comment.
Thank you. Piggy.
Yeah, I guess a couple of ways to sort of navigate the maps versus written versus descriptions for me would be an interesting delving into not just the visual maps, because that's one look, but what has been written, because there have been descriptions of islands and Thoreau doing surveys, and there's been all this other written work that doesn't come with the visual graphics. And so to me, it's like, how was there an island with no pond? Where was this island that Thoreau and Loring went and surveyed? Where were these other sort of natural elements that created this history prior to 1857 or whatever? So I just like to understand the historical parts of what was written also about this area. It kind of like your non-European view of what was going on here. What were people walking and living and experiencing here?
So it sounds like there's a lot of interest about the history. So what about, go ahead.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why we have a member of the natural, I can't remember the title.
I'm a planner with the town,
Right.
but I'm a historian.
Why we have a historian.
So the group has questions about the history. So moving on beyond that, in terms of some of the statements that are made in that section one about, you know, the large watershed to pond ratio, you know, the flushing speed, are there aspects of any of that discussion that either struck you as, I don't understand this at all, or I want to know more about this, or I accept it, it seems fine? Where are you on that? Go ahead, Bill.
I have I don't know, it's a question as much as just remarkable in one sense. I thought the statement that that the water discharges into the pond through a broad delta of emergent wetlands on the western shore, that's fine. Although that's worth looking at too. But then given the size of the pond's watershed, the volume of water contained in the stream feeding the pond, the water enters the pond and flushes through relatively rapidly. In fact, I think we read somewhere else where it changes every 24 hours. That is really significant, I think. I mean, there are very few ponds that I know of that actually make that kind of an exchange of water. And I think that's something that we should look at in terms of the future characteristics here about this. So that's one thing.
Sorry, just a point of clarification. What you said at the beginning about the water enters the pond,
Through a delta?
and you said,
I said the delta is interesting too, because I suspect, I may be wrong about, I'm not a geologist or but I suspect that the delta means a lot of that, my guess is a lot of the sediment is dumped right there at that entrance of the pond, where the Neshoba Brook empties in. that's where the sediment is building up. And then other places where where a lot of people's houses, they probably don't see as much because there it's relatively clear. That's my assumption, but I may be wrong about that entirely.
I think
So
that
you-
was in here somewhere.
Is it here?
actually.
Okay.
Did you have a?
No, there's no question. I just think it's significant for us to be aware about the flushing speed of that pond. That stands out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it stands out.
It was described more as a pool in a river.
Yes, yes.
Right.
Say it again, it's a pool.
I think, correct me with the words here, but it was described, it functions more like a wide pool in the river, like if folks have canoed at Fairhaven Bay or something. like
Yes,
that.
yeah.
Which, when you get down to the
Absent the
various
dam.
methods of trying to treat or deal with this, is also central to it, because anything you do there has to stand up to the water's changing so fast
Yeah.
that it doesn't have time to work.
I just want to respond to the point about eutrophication, that this the section here actually has almost a dictionary definition of the pond state of eutrophication. I mean, it's unquestionable from the report.
Where was that, Malcolm? Exactly.
On page 1, it comes down to a consequence, much of it is filled with the last paragraph.
Oh, yeah.
And they come down to the sediment accumulation, excess nutrients in the water column, dense growth of exotic aquatic plants have led to a seriously degraded condition. These degraded conditions have diminished the ecological value of the pond with regard to its ability to support fish and wildlife populations. That's the definition of eutrophication.
Well, yes, but dissolved oxygen is centered to that. Again, I don't want to belabor
No,
that.
it's not. Dissolved oxygen is not part of the definition of eutrophication. Dissolved oxygen is a consequence of it.
Correct, but that degradation, well, that's degradation's a consequence as well. Okay, again, let's move on.
Yes.
Okay.
Just point out, eutrophication is a natural process.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing really wrong with it. And I will say, just to continue with the DO analysis, like if you look at Oars's data set, 'cause they collect samples upstream and downstream of the pond. Most of the year, they're actually the same level. The DO in the brook up in Acton, I think it's Acton, is the same as downstream of the pond at the dam. Just happens to be during the peak growing season in the summer times, the DO does drop. But, you know, a lot of what happens to Warren's Pond is because of what's happening in the brook. You know, it's flowing downstream. So they are, you wanna talk about a system, they are connected.
So let me hijack the conversation a little bit. Because again, we don't have the time at this point, and this is not the purpose of this conversation to dissect the mechanisms and the data itself. We're looking for more of a broad view of what else do you want to know? So in this conversation, Keith, about DO, eutrophication, is there a sense in the room about whether the way that the pond is described broadly in section 1, is that accurate? Do you feel like that is accurate today? And if not, what's missing?
Yes, it is.
Well, I would question, because it talks about maximum depth, and I'm sure since 2012, those numbers have changed. I know there's been I've seen boats out there doing some testing. I'm curious if there's new information about depths, just because it's been a long time. I'm curious what's changed in those 12 years.
Right. Anything else? Yeah.
Sorry, just maybe stepping maybe too far back, but obviously this report focuses on the pond as a pond, right? And so that sentence, that paragraph that Malcolm directed us to just ends with a comparison to healthier open water habitat.
But we don't know
But
what.
back to our
Yeah.
initial charge here, we're looking at a whole system that happens to be a pond, or has been for 170 years. So, or more, sorry. So, you know, we're taking this report as you introduced and looking at this body, and then we'll move on to further assessments. But as long as I think our charge is to contemplate the whole system and various paths for its future
and not solving the problem that this report was looking at solving.
It's one thing if there are questions about whether DO levels are a problem. Then that's, or that the DO that they identified in 2012 is wrong. Or whether those are the kinds of gaps that we want to try to fill if you think that that's important. It all rides on what the group thinks is important for the next part of this process and deciding what happens next, right?
Right, I think one thing I'm hearing Jeff say is you would want to see us look a little more at the broader system than what we see in this report as part of our analysis.
Yes.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and sort of back to, and these might not be the right goals, but in the more recent alternatives analysis, like what are we trying to solve for?
Mhm.
Are we trying to solve for nutrients or not? Are we trying to solve for DO or not? Are we trying to solve for connectivity, recreational access, all of these things, like, then we have our things that we're mapping and comparing alternatives against.
Yeah, and then I think, I brought this up before and it does come up in this section 1, is the definition of reduced recreational opportunity. I think that's a really important point for us to keep in mind that that is a subjective sentence, because I think that if we've listed the recreational opportunities, I think kayaking in, whatever it is, 54 mile or 54 acres may be reduced, but kayaking in open water is still really available. Canoeing is very available. Skating is very available. So, I don't know if anybody who says, oh, we've reduced it from 54 acres of canoeing to 30 acres of canoeing is really is what that represents. To me, this represents, like, we got rid of some opportunities for recreation. So I just want us to keep in mind what that means for reduced recreational opportunities, because if there's no pond, there is no, check off a few of these.
Yes, subjective diminishment, and no,
Right,
you don't have
that's
any
right.
way to know what that means.
Yeah, they might be
exactly.
equal, they might be
Yeah.
more than, so I just want to make sure that that's not,
It's not lost.
it's not like,
Okay. Good.
Yeah, just on that, I think this is in the historic context. Yeah, if you look in the historic context, there was more.
like,
So-
what was there more?
So there was a swimming
There-
area, there was beach.
There were
You know,
72
Yeah,
acres
yeah.
of open water at one point.
yeah, there was
But
much
is that
more
more
than it is.
recreation than?
Well, it says reduced.
I see.
So
Okay,
if you
okay.
don't have a swimming area anymore and the beach, it is reduced. So I don't want to go
Yeah,
too
yeah, yeah.
much into wordsmithing, but
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
a certain way, we have to accept there is a certain trend on the pond. And where's the trend going is more towards less than more.
But I would say
Yeah.
beach and swimming are reduced not because of the things that we've listed here, but because we didn't replace the dock, we didn't
Well,
replace
you
the
can't,
beach.
you can't allow swimming now.
In
People
19
swim there.
Yeah, but you should not.
There is swimming.
You should not,
Swimming there.
you should not.
in 1985, you could canoe easily around Scout Island.
And I've done that last year.
Yeah, but it's not exactly easy. I mean,
So-
you can force your way through, but it's not an easy paddle.
I don't know, you should go today. It's-
Okay,
But
so
the day is,
moving on,
no,
right, because, well.
Someone else, I asked you.
Oh, I know, I'm not ignoring.
Oh, I know.
I want to try to wrap up the discussion of section 1, if we can, with just the last few questions, so go ahead.
All right. So the diminished recreation, I was also going to say, there's also a time scale versus geography, but I just wanted to add that on. But my question was mostly around, there's a little paragraph around the pond warming. So I'm curious about, once the pond is warmed, like, is there backtracking of that warming somehow, or is it with any of these alternatives?
So what, so.
Yeah,
so
understanding
what
the
is
mechanism.
Of the warming.
Yeah.
Okay. And when we say backtrack, I mean that it would, yeah, that it could be reversed.
Yeah,
Okay. What else?
that's all I have.
Oh,
So this might have been said by others differently, but I just feel, when it says diminished, I just feel like it doesn't really describe accurately the historical recreational capacity of it. I've heard people who have mentioned to me, who've lived in the community for decades, someone told me our scout master said, I took swimming lessons at Wanderers Pond. And I don't think this really, it kind of generally says there's canoeists, kayakers, fishermen, doesn't talk about swimming. So I think having a better baseline, if you will, of what it was before it was diminished would be very helpful.
I think that's come through really clearly. In the report it uses vague terms and it's not clear how much research they did. Last couple comments?
So,
Yes.
so the other piece that sort of jumped out was so looking at seasonally, we think about something, we say, oh, this is the broad general term of where we are at this particular point in time. But seasonally, what's the impact? Because, it's like, I know June's coming up, water chestnuts are coming. They might not be there today, but they're coming. I don't care what body of water you're dealing with. So the reality is that you could say during that time they're diminished, but it might be after a pull or after the fall or after everything's died off, it's not diminished. And then what's the value when you're looking at that? And I think that a big piece of that plays into sort of that speed and how things are circulating throughout within it. But then you're also looking at where's the settlement one settling, what's it doing to the depth that someone else brought up, and where are those key points? Because you're not going to have where the water is really cycling through changes that much in depth, but off the side the sediment moves outward. And at the beginning where it's sort of bubbling over, then you have a whole nother story. You're talking about a completely different set of rules. So it's a matter of, as we're going forward from today, because it's like we have to look back to the past with history, but our history is also today. We're living in the history today. So what's happening today, and then looking forward, because as I think about the task force, we're really thinking about what it looks like 20 years from now, 40 years from now, 60 years from now, based on decisions we make today.
So given that I'm gonna just pause for one moment. Since you are delving into sort of the technical side, I would suggest that we move into the discussion of section 3, because that's really the heart of technical information. Is that okay with you, or do you still want to talk about section
I have
1?
one sort of really different thing to say is I think that a lot has happened since 2012 that's clearly not captured in here. The Giroux recreation area development, the opening of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, those have really changed, especially on that side of the pond. The access, the expectation of access. And so when we think about the pond system, it just seems to me that we need to kind of update this for things that have happened since, because that's a relatively large amount of change compared to, say, the 30-year period before that was generally focused on in this report, which, I read to be basically pretty authoritative from like 1985 to 2010, that kind of time frame, but got vague there and obviously couldn't know the future.
Well, there was an open question that was asked that, I don't know if you're gonna answer it, but
Can I add to something quickly to what Mark?
yeah.
Very well timed.
So just to repeat, there was an open question you asked about temperature, but
Yeah.
you didn't really get an answer, so
Well, I don't think I'm meant to get the answer right
Okay.
now.
Yeah, we're
It's
really just
something I'm-
gathering the questions at this point.
Paul wants to say something.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Mark said. There's been some mention of kind of restoring to what it was, but yes, things have changed a lot, but also don't forget about climate change and the fact that there's a lot of extreme precipitation, flooding, and ice skating may never be the same as it was. So I think we have to put it in context when we talk about goals. So the reality of how things have changed, both in terms of the assets and in terms of the natural environment.
well, I'll just add, any warming in the pond is also occurring in Neshoba Brook.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not quite the same.
No.
Neshoba Brook doesn't sit baking in the pond, in the sun all day. It's still water.
So we can look at the data, that might be worthwhile, but
Yep.
there are times when they're actually the same, so.
Okay. I'm just getting this last piece here.
Not quite that.
Not quite, a few more.
Oh, we have a few more.
So no, it just occurs to me, just so it's not missed, that you might consider it extra recreational, is say, the ceremonial, social, cultural aspects, for instance, the Boy Scouts holding their crossover ceremony. And I don't know if there's another time in the meeting
There will be,
to discuss that?
yes, because it's gonna come into that discussion about recreational value that's later on in the report, so yes.
Just on the-
And we wouldn't skip it.
Sorry, Bill, thanks.
Okay.
Just on the history, too, visuals obviously doesn't capture the status of wildlife. Before the bond was created, just one item.
And current, right? We should consider.
It's a little short on the current.
Yeah, yeah,
But
definitely,
it has some
definitely. I could,
information.
I know I'm not even that good at it and I could list a few others, so there's other people who are better at it, yeah.
Okay.
One more thing, I'm just curious, because it's mentioned for the first time in these first couple of pages, well, maybe it's actually in section 2. The Warner's Pond Stewardship Committee, who were they and where are they and whatever happened to them? Does anyone know? Do you know
So,
anything?
yeah, so they were a town committee, a subcommittee of the Natural Resources Commission.
Okay.
They were established 2004 or 5.
Okay,
And Joanne Loynes and Charlie Simpson were the co-chairs for a long time. And they were both powerhouses
Yeah.
and got a lot done. But after they both passed and the committee wasn't meeting and
Okay.
there was just not interest amongst the residents at the time to continue the work of that subcommittee.
okay,
So it basically stopped in about 2012.
okay.
Okay, so we're gonna move into section 3. So this is the section that really gives you the results of the study, right? On water quality, other issues, right? Biological resources. So there's, you see the 6 sections of section 3 up on the screen there. And our purpose in going through this again, very similar to what Rachel was saying, not to get agreement, but we really do want to understand, does this information make sense to you, right? Do you understand it, what it means? So if something is really confusing to you, you just say like, I don't get this, right? Don't be shy, like we want to know, and that means we're gonna spend some more time making sure everyone understands all these issues. Right, so do you understand this? Do you have questions about it? Do you have any concerns about the data and its accuracy? Right, this is, part of us figuring out what we need to spend time on moving forward and how much, we need to really do to clarify what these issues mean to different people. So don't be shy if we're talking about stuff and you're like, I really need someone to give me a primer on this. Great, like it's really helpful. So some highlights from this section, and you all should, of course, have the document speak for itself, but there was a biological resource assessment. So they looked at fish species, right, identified them as primarily warm water. They looked at aquatic plants. You can see, the familiar list: variable water milfoil, fanwort, water chestnut, and then some purple loosestrife on the margins. They name a rapid spread since 1999. They describe the habitat and the wildlife. They have these 4 different habitats that they describe: shallow marsh, scrub, shrub, emergent marsh and inlets, and open water habitat, and an upland habitat on the islands. They name habitats for different animal life, right? Especially, naming the scrub, shrub, emergent wetland system as being, particularly beneficial home for wildlife. And then there's also the recreational resource assessment, where they talk about the use by the Scouts, camping, nature study, the use around swimming, historically, ice skating, hockey, ice cutting, right? So talking about the history of recreation. And then they name, that these activities are being threatened by the shrinking open water and more limited access. So we just want to check in again, like questions on these pieces, concerns around the data, anything that you'd want us to spend more time on.
Can you put up that map of the
Sure.
the plant life, the density of the plant
So
life?
that is, the
Figure
bio
9.
volume, this is after the treatment. This
No.
is plant cover, this one on the.
Plant cover,
This one, yeah. Okay,
and then plot.
and then, yeah,
It's not coming up.
It's not coming up.
oh, sorry, I need to change the, yeah, doing the wrong thing, okay. Here we go, you should see it there.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's not the one I was thinking of. That tells you what types. It doesn't show you the density. That's the
You have the one on the
one
left.
on the left, yeah,
Yes,
that one. That shows the density of the plant life in the
Right.
pond,
right,
right?
great, thanks.
It's just that it's interesting to see where where it's most thick, you know? And Paul has his hand up behind you.
Yeah, so Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, on the resource, if you can put up the recreational resource assessment as well. I think from a historical perspective was written, that's probably pretty accurate, but to pick up on Mark's comment, you know, I believe we need to think of Waters Pond as part of an integrated system, which includes other recreational assets around it. So the description here is sort of looking at Waters Pond as an isolated entity. And I think that probably isn't even appropriate for present day and certainly not for the future. So I just want to kind of put that out there as we think about the pond. We should think about it as part of a larger quote unquote system of recreational opportunities.
Great, thanks, Paul. I see Sven, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, the question here is more not what is in it, but what is missing.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you look at wildlife, what kind of wildlife we should expect having a water body there? Let's say what kind of, so let's start, let's say with fish. Yeah, what kind of fish should be there? And what is missing? What kind of plants should be there that is missing because we have invasive species? What kind of recreational value should be there, but it's missing? So these things, we're saying, thinking more kind of, to your point, 20, 30 years out, what can you kind of do with that to reach certain goals, to achieve things that are missing today? That's here. It's good to see these kind of features are there, but it's not listed that the alewife is not there. And who else, who knows what else is missing? So that's, that's my thinking.
So you're saying one thing we could try to come up with as a task force is, you know, different snapshots of what it could look like under different scenarios or comparisons of other places that would shed a light on, you know, what it could be under different scenarios again. Yeah, great. Other thoughts? Yeah.
A couple of questions, and these are probably this is showing my,
Yes, perfect.
lack of knowledge on some of this stuff is like, what, they're taught, there's a paragraph about the sonar treatment that was done. And at the time it was effective, but it didn't work because of some technicality that I don't quite understand. And then there was this, right after that, there was effectiveness of the herbicide treatment, which they thought was going to be effective in the 2012 growing season. And then what happened? So there's 2 treatments that were being done. I'd just like to, I don't know what those are and what that looks like.
Yeah.
And then, I'd like to talk about the recreation separately. I think, you know, we're getting sort of moving ahead, like there's all this technical information that you said we might like delve into. So I'd like to delve into a little bit, because there's all this other recreation and wildlife and plant life we should talk about as a whole chunk of information too.
Right, so it's not, you're saying you would like a little more explanation on the technical pieces.
Yeah.
Just to make sure you're really understanding it and can contribute on that piece.
Some of them were like, oh, this was successful, and then we didn't do it again, but this was not successful, and so we shouldn't do that again. Like, I just wanna know, so I'm not.
Yeah, and reading this, that doesn't give you the light bulb.
No, they're smart enough to know why it didn't. It just doesn't go into why. The why, it was more like, we did this was really successful, and then it ends.
Okay, so more about why.
And this one we did, and that's probably not going to be successful. I don't know why.
Great. Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
So the other thing that they talk a lot about in this section too is the sediment. And they checked it out, and the overall quality of the sediment and what it's worth, and is it good, is it bad? And it seemed to me that they were saying that the overall, it said physical testing indicated that pond sediment was primarily fine sand, according to the Unified Soil Classification System. So that's, I'm assuming, a good thing, right? That you can use this, and so that's a positive part about the pond, and I think we need to understand that a little bit more so too.
Right. So you kind of moved to the next slide that I was gonna share.
Sorry.
Great. Why don't I just share this data and then we can talk about section 3 as a whole, and I see hands, so we'll get there in a second. Just to name other pieces of this section. They talk about the bathymetry, which is basically the bottom of the pond. They know that the water depth is 4 to 12 feet. They talk about the water flow path, right? And Bill pointed us to kind of a diagram that shows it kind of going up and over Scout Island. They talk about the depth of sediments, which is up to 9 feet deep, an average of 2.8, and there's a map that shows you where those pockets are. And as you're pointing out, Chris, they did an analysis of the sediment chemistry, which suggested that this is not, toxic sediment that's gonna have to, go into a landfill, for example. It could be safely dredged, right, is the bottom line. They also have sediment loading and water quality testing results that they shared, which point to specific sediment and nutrient hotspots and where those are. So there's maps of that. And then they talk about how much sediment is actually being brought into the pond. So they talk about, this number of cubic yards per year, which is equivalent to, they say 5 10-ton dump trucks. So we were just curious, like, what does a 10-ton dump truck look like? So there's the image right there. And then they also do this nutrient load modeling, which is basically they look at how many nutrients or how much nutrients are being put into the pond, right? That's called the load, and they look at phosphorus specifically. And then if you do an analysis of the pond in terms of how much it should or could be getting, right, for it to be stable or kind of natural-ish, right? That's permissible load or a critical load is somewhat higher, right? Which suggests that, productivity problems are most certain to persist. And so you can see, the numbers for permissible and critical, and then the load that they calculated based on their study. On the screen there. So again, I see lots of hands. I'll be done talking. And I think Liz, you were next before I went on. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I had, going back to the animal, I'd also, I'd be curious now, it said, someone mentioned 2024 and 2012 are pretty far. I'd be curious to see if there is a way to do some sort of assessment of what's there now, if anything has come back, if anything has left.
Yeah.
And then I actually had another question since we've gone ahead is, and this is like, feels like a very silly, small question, but one of the things that looks like it is an input in figuring out what the critical load is what the annual average precipitation is. I mean, this summer notwithstanding, because it was like a bizarre summer, but I'm wondering if that is generally the same, if it has changed over the past with different climate things happening.
Yeah.
If it's projected to change, if that's even a thing that anyone has thought about.
Yeah.
And if that has any impact on sort of the kind of what they're thinking about.
Great. So sort of more about understanding the climate impacts and specifically on some of these modeling.
Yeah.
Issues. Great. Okay, yeah.
I was just gonna say that for a plant and animal inventory, it's fairly cursory. And especially for the shrub areas, what some areas, fringing the Shelby Brook might become, if the pond were reduced or whatever. So it's hard to read much into the report of what's there, other than this intensive assessment of the emergent and aquatic vegetation. But it's hard to use this to compare what's there and what could be there.
Right.
Anyway, so more resources
Yeah.
needed in that
So
regard.
this doesn't get us all the way there on that piece for sure. Okay. Yeah, Malcolm, go ahead.
One big change between when this report was written and current time is our growing awareness of PFAS. They were obviously not measured back then because we didn't actually have techniques to measure. And we still have a limited number of approaches to be measuring PFAS. But it would be highly unlikely that sediments don't contain significant quantities of PFAS. And that has to be taken into account in any thinking of what to do with the sediment and how to manage it. But that's speculation because we haven't measured for it.
Let's see Vicky's hand and then we'll go to Keith.
Yes, I have a question on, you talk about the phosphorus levels and what it would be versus what it is, and all of the sediment. So we, if we get rid of some of the sediment, whatever we do with it, we should retest it, obviously. But what happens to all this incoming sediment? Let's say it is sediment that has PFAS in it or other kinds of, if we remove the dam, where does that go? And does it affect other waters further on more than it does today? Because now it settles here, and yes, obviously that's not good for the pond, but where does that all go? And how much quantity is like now somewhere where it's not today?
Mhm.
I'm just
Great.
curious, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, so understanding under this alternative downstream impact.
Right.
Okay, great.
So-
And then we'll go to Bill. Yeah.
So on page 27, section of it, it's talking about nutrients, probably towards the end of this section. They just conclude that although the nutrients and the suspended solids are high in the outfalls and which are the stormwater, drains going into the pond, they reference Wright Road. They conclude that the relative contribution to the pollutant load on the pond is very low from these outfalls, given the low flows and discharge from them. So I don't, like nutrient load modeling, I don't have a lot of experience with that. Same with sediment, so there are a lot of conclusions made based on, it seems like a mostly just a modeling effort. So I'm just wondering, could it be a different analysis if it was more calibrated with actual data from the watershed? As opposed to just making assumptions based on, I'm assuming like a land use classification map.
Okay, great. So something of a deeper dive on the modeling and limits or opportunities to make it more accurate. Great. Bill, go ahead.
So I'm curious, talking about some of this, and including the characteristics of the sediment. And I don't remember, though I read them. Was that tested in the dredging report, Delia, that was done in, what was that, 2019?
So was it tested for what?
Was the sediment tested for in terms of pollutants? Was that all done then as well?
So it was done, there was sediment testing that was done in the 2012 plan. Was it
redone?
I'd have to check, but I believe it was redone in the 2018 dredging feasibility study.
Okay, how about the last one? I wasn't.
Not in the alternatives
Not in the
analysis.
alternatives. Okay.
I think if those have a limited time frame of value. So under, any major alternative.
Yeah.
Stretching or, then they'll probably have to be retested.
Okay.
Can you see my hand?
Yes, I can see your hand.
Hi.
Because it's so hard to get attention online, let's go to you.
I'm sorry, I can't see other hands, so I don't know if I'm interrupting or not. Oh, that was one of my questions, Bill, whether these data are the most current and complete data sets. I think there's some more data that, if we're describing sort of the current situation, we have to go a little bit beyond this report as far as some of the chemistry. But the bullet that says sediment and nutrient hotspots, what is a sediment hotspot? Is that accumulation in the sediment, or is that suspended material coming in? What is meant by that bullet? I'm just curious.
Yeah, does anyone have an answer to that?
I think that means sources, right? Sort of point sources. We have a big watershed with a lot of non-point source, so just like Dog Poop and.
Yeah,
yeah. And they were trying to go and look like, is there a nursery that's something like or a golf?
Right,
That's something
right.
that's like
Yeah.
where we can address.
I misdescribed that.
Yeah, that's what I call it. I think it should be sediment nutrient source areas, I think, rather than hotspots. Hotspot connotes sort of something that's present in the sediments themselves. And also, I haven't seen in this report any sediment nutrient data. I think there are sediment nutrient data that are more current, but the sediment quality information in this report, I didn't see any reports on nutrient content of the sediment itself. Having said that, I think the nutrient issues are more in the water quality than they are from sediments. But I know there's been discussion in the dredging report about sort of a mass of nutrients that are tied up in the sediments and could be a source, an ongoing source to the overlying water. I've always questioned that, but that's sort of an incomplete piece of information, guys, on sort of sediment nutrients and its if we're gonna remove sediments, does that help the nutrients situation? I think not, because they're mostly coming into the pond from upstream as opposed from instream, but I think that needs to be clarified.
I'm sorry, so nutrients do get stored in the sediments, they absolutely do.
Yeah,
So-
they do, but are they released from the sediments? They get stored in there, but is it a source into the water and therefore a eutrophication issue?
Yeah, it really, I mean, it is, absolutely. We can explore that more for sure.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks. So let's just see, who else would like to have that, just so I can see how many more comments we have. We want Mark and David. Okay, and anyone online? Okay, so let's take these comments, and then maybe we can move to the next section, but go ahead, Mark.
So one of the things that I didn't really develop a sense of is how fast is this really changing in terms of time? So, you back up 5 dump trucks every year and it goes in there. How long does the pond look like the pond that we recognize today under these conditions? And is there a point in time where that starts to accelerate and degradation happens fast? So I didn't see any kind of, base case, what's gonna happen if there aren't management steps taken, or, is there a sort of a low investment level of management versus a medium versus a high? So I didn't really get a really great sense of the intervention. My overall impression from this report was it was kind of written with the assumption that a steady state was being attempted. So, and I think that the thinking now, what we're engaged with here is considering something more severe, sort of outside the bounds of what this apparently was written for. And so that's an impression I got. And I think that in order to be comprehensive, we need to figure out a way to sort of expand those parameters. And I would start with that base case, just a clear understanding of what happens if nothing happens.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're interested, Mark, and not necessarily just like the numbers, but what does that look like? What does that
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
Right, for what the pond. can be
Yeah,
used for,
what's
so.
really going on there and how fast is it actually changing? And is
Yeah.
that change accelerating?
Yeah,
Those are the questions I was left with, and I couldn't suss that out from, the detailed, really nose on the glass sort of look that this was.
yeah. Great, David, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, this is the right time on the recreational, because it's 3.2.2 and we're
Sure,
not
right.
talking about any of that.
We will, and then actually go to the recreational goals that are in that report, but if you want to talk about the observations, great, go ahead. Yeah, I
Well-
think your point is, don't worry about it.
Just, okay, so just that, in terms of recreation, again, they talk about
Yeah.
Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, camping, nature site,
Mhm.
cooking, sports,
Mhm.
and just the ceremonial aspect.
Yeah.
And to that end, the troop in town invites the task force to come to the crossover ceremony. This year, it will be held on May 4th, and I can provide you exact time.
That'd be good.
That's great,
It
great.
it
Yeah.
means coming out in a canoe. so-
Right,
May
wonderful.
May
David.
4th.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
All right,
I have a question-
so.
I have
yeah,
a question on
Vicky,
water quality.
Mhm.
I think it was brought up a couple times, but I don't actually know what the water quality test was then and what it is now and how that compares to other waterways in Concord. Because I just want to understand, we could give it a number, let's say it's a 10, but is every waterway a 10? Like, I just want to
Right.
understand
Right.
where this is and what that means.
What
in
does
the
this
town.
level of eutrophication mean? How does it compare to other commonly known places?
And what's the water quality? Because I think people are,
Yeah.
are like, oh, you can't touch the water, you
Ah,
can't stand in
okay.
it, you can't swim in it, you can't. But I don't know that that's
Safety,
true. Is
yeah,
it
health.
safe, as safe as white? Is it not as safe? Is it, whatever, where does it stand in water quality?
Great. Okay. And with that, I thought I might have seen you raise a hand briefly. Do you wanna?
I did, but I don't, I was just gonna say in terms of, what it looks like. I think the only thing they mentioned is in the first section, they talk about how the, invasives are doubling essentially at a certain rate, so I don't know if there's any conclusions that come out of that. That was not, sorry, it's not really good, sorry.
No, where was, sorry.
On, I'm not good at switching back and forth, sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
All the way up. in
Sorry, we can find it later.
Yeah,
Don't worry,
there's
don't
some, they have some
Yeah,
sort of
yeah, yeah.
percentages about the invasive.
Okay.
There was a comment somewhere, wasn't there, saying like, the invasives kind of can't possibly expand because
Yeah.
they're already everywhere.
Yeah. But then they had someone, I like
Yeah.
hallucinate things that I read sometimes. Somewhere I thought I read something about it doubling every X years.
Okay, well, if you want to point the group towards that, you find it before the end of the meeting, go ahead. I'm gonna turn it back to Rachel for our next. So we wanted to talk about, we grouped these next two pieces, even though the recreational goals are in section 3 technically, and then the management goals are in section 4. We grouped them because thematically they seem to make sense together, so we're going to walk us through those.
We have management goals?
Run the recreational goals. Sorry. Well, they're on the screen. if you
Oh,
want to see them.
no, okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my guide and I'm not, I'm looking at my map to the meeting. Okay, so they put, right, this also struck me that the recreational goals are discussed in 2 sections in the report. So they listed out, these are, aspirational, to continue to maintain and improve the pond's fishing opportunities, to clear select areas of water lilies and dense aquatic veg, to provide greater access to Scout Island and other areas of the pond, to address excess sediment and nutrients in the ponds, to improve the existing boat launch access off Commonwealth Avenue, and to maintain primitive boat landings on Scott Island and Pond Street to allow for easier access. So knowing that these are only some of the goals, but these are, I think, largely the recreational goals, right? The goal, there's the next section further down talks about other goals. But in terms of these recreational goals, are these goals that seem still valid to you? Or,
I think it's important to put this in context, because the sentence before this was, there's a whole bunch of recreation that's been outlined, and then it says, in order to enhance the above,
yes,
right? So the above would still be included.
yes,
We would do these things to enhance the recreation that is described above.
good point.
There's like
Paul's
10
trying to
lines
get our
before that,
attention
right?
too.
Right, good point.
Yeah, it's in addition to.
In addition to, right, in addition to what has already been stated. So I mean, it comes back around to the whole question about recreational use of the pond and what's.
Paul's hands up too.
Oh, Paul, go ahead, Paul. Sorry, Paul.
I mean, I think these recreational goals are fine. They were goals written in 2012. I think we probably need to have a fuller discussion given, we're in 2024 and we have Giroux and Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and, the recreational goals are somewhat linked to the solution. If the pond remains a pond isolated from the river, for example, that's one set of goals. If there's, so I think it's a little premature to say that these are all the goals, and I don't think you were implying that. But
No,
I think these need to be updated, but nothing here is wrong as a goal. I think access to the pond from Giroux is probably something that could be improved for the 4th bullet, but my only comment is these were fine in 2012. They need to be, they're not complete, I think.
so I think that leads right into the next question that I would ask is, well, what would you add? So you've named one thing to improve connectivity to Giroux.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was gonna say, definitely. I mean, we've got a great resource, on the pond that, that the whole point of Giroux Park was to create recreation, and initially it was for swimming and a boat launch area and all these wonderful things that were associated with the pond. So yeah, I definitely see that as a huge piece of tying in with the pond.
Yes.
Another thing will be changing is, the future of the Department of Corrections land on the west
Correct.
side of the pond, northwest of the pond. And so
we get to envision and talk about access on that side.
So, yeah, so that it leads into sort of really thinking broadly about what other goals would you have for recreation? Because these are goals, these are forward, not evaluating the past.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead. Chris, yeah.
I just wanted to add one more thing into that as well, along with the MCI, is that I think when we're looking at Warner's Pond, you know, we need to understand, you know, the ecological benefits of it and whatnot, and what we can do for it. But also with all the new building and new housing that's going on in West Concord, in addition to MCI that we've all just learned about, you know, there's at least 6 other areas where new housing is being put in West Concord, pretty much West Concord Center.
Mhm.
You know, you have Assabet Bluff, you have 166 Com Ave, you have that other little stretch, I think it's 13B Com Ave, I'm not sure.
Baker Ave.
Baker Ave, and then you have, there's,
Potentially on Main Street.
yes, yeah, that other area there. So I mean, that's, you know, a lot of new housing coming in and what's, so if we want to look at recreational goals, well, what would be beneficial for all these new people moving in? You know, some sort of wonderful recreational area there as a possibility. That what could we do to help, you know, Warner's Pond?
Can you be more specific about what is a recreational area? What does that mean to you?
So, I mean, I guess I'm looking back on what was presented for Giroux, initially, when the town purchased that land. You know, they had a boat launch or a canoe launch, and there was swimming, and there was a boardwalk access to the pond so that people could go and see the pond and access the pond and have picnics or whatever there. I mean, there was a pretty wide variety of options available to people to utilize it. And as we've said, it's right on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail as well. So, I mean, there's great access. You can get on the trail and you'll be in West Concord Center in 5 minutes walking.
I would add to that, I think the density numbers are pretty extraordinary from 2012 to today in terms of housing in West Concord. And to, you know, you always, yeah, an enormous amount of good, which, you know, given the train station there and the village, we know why people want to live here, and it's a spectacular place to live, but I think their children probably coming with that density because the schools are great and it's a great place to live. So I'm always looking for support of what other recreation do children need on this side of Concord, not having to cross Route 2. Route 2 is impossible. For young folks, so like, can there be a park here? Can there be play equipment on Giroux? Can there be swimming lessons? Can there be paddleboard lessons here for children in the summer? Can there be skating lessons in the winter? I hope climate change allows us to have that. I don't know, but maybe, but hopefully there'll be more swimming then. If there's less skating, maybe there'll be more swimming and camping and boating and kayaking and paddleboarding. I think some people here paddleboard on that pond. So those are all things that could happen off of Giroux and off of the boat launch, the old boat launch location of Com Ave.
On Warner's Pond.
On Warner's
Okay.
Pond, yes.
So Malcolm, then Sven, and then Liz.
I think it's a very relevant point, but I guess a big question for me is what is the capacity of the pond in terms of providing recreational activity? If we increase the population of West Concord and we increase the use of the pond, say we double it, we triple it, we quadruple it,
Right.
it's a pretty tiny pond when it comes down to it. When you look at the map and you see the ponds around. We also, the Bruce Freeman Trail hasn't yet really, Giroux Park isn't there effectively. How many people will be coming to use the pond from the Bruce Freeman Trail? And what is the impact of, 300-400 kids peeing in the water every time they go swimming? I mean, that's a silly example. I know that. And it wasn't serious, but to give, I mean, there's a lot of things that come with that we need to think of for the future.
Right.
If we're going to add, I mean, I think the Baker Avenue he has what, 300?
About 210.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge increase in the
Correct.
population.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's
I will
just
just remind
one.
you, there's rapid flushing in the.
We'll install a chain.
Take your golf ball, right?
Yeah.
Summer.
Just the one to get you. Oh, I'm sorry, you were
Yeah,
speaking. Sorry.
Are you finished now?
Yes.
Okay, Sven, then Liz, and then David.
Yeah, I just would love to us to think broader than Europa. Europa is a small speck of a lot, to be honest. If you pack everything in that area, you have no green left. There's barely walk. I walked it, I was done in 5 minutes. Yeah, so the recreational vision must be bigger than that little speck of it. And someone told me there was once in history, there was even a walk around the pond. So if you think of solutions, again, it's like we have a water body and we, let's say, in one of the scenarios, you remove the dam and you have perhaps more marshland. Could you have kind of a hike around this? Yeah, something where you use the newly harvested land for more recreation than we have now. You can a little bit walk a little bit further than Giro, on this little tiny thing, and you're hoping you're not getting shot. And the noise from Highway 2 is coming over, and then you end there. You're done very quickly. So I think we have to think larger than what is there. And she says, hey, see this as an opportunity and an asset, that when we look at the different options, it's like, which option gives us more than what we have today? I think that is, this is, we had it before, this is a status quo kind of a report across everything, and
Yeah.
here's the same. It's not the vision where this could be.
Good. Yeah.
Okay, so, I was actually gonna also talk about walking, and just, I mean, and I think no matter what, in any kind of solution, some sort of increase to walking paths, kind of nature outlooks. I haven't, I'll be honest, gone really to the Pond Street side, so I don't know what's there, in terms of access for walking. I know behind my house there is some sort of there's some woods that people kind of hack through.
There's no.
You know, so, but, you know, we kind of try to walk through there, and so like there are other places other than Giro that you could walk, but some sort of either way flushed out walking nature overlooks. And actually, that's one of the things that someone was saying about playgrounds and stuff. I know this is just like taking into account that whole idea of in other departments and what their goals are. Like, I feel like, you know, when I looked at the recreation committee thing, one of the things that as like a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old at home, they were like, nature playgrounds. And I was like, I was like, oh my God, if we could put a nature playground there, something that would be amazing. So like, I think you have some opportunity for overlap in and looking at like what the recreation committee wants and seeing if there are things that can happen in either situation, any situation.
So Paul actually wants to
Hang on,
respond to that.
One person ahead of you. Go ahead, David.
Just on your point about the broader system, I think recreationally as well in this town, because it does seem like we're gonna have population that's gonna need more recreational outlets in West Concord. And the fact that they are, it's just so well accessible there, and making sure that, I guess, you know, where is the recreation department in this planning for this? I guess, you know, to hear from them here at this task force would be good.
There's Paul.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about, I'd like to hear like,
Right.
more like a
Right,
presentation.
not today.
Yeah, yeah.
Paul, go ahead.
Well, the recreation department is in the process of thinking about enhancements to Giro. I don't want to say too much about that because it's way off, but I mean, we're thinking about Giro in particular. But I do want to mention that these recreational goals and opportunities, and Sven mentioned think larger, how could we improve and expand the recreational opportunities? In that vein, some of the recreational opportunities are linked to the solution, the ecological solution. And I'll just throw one out there right now. I don't mean to be controversial, and it's not a conclusion, but connecting this pond to the Assabet River, for example, is a different type of recreational activity where you actually, you basically connect the pond to a larger system, not just to Giroux, but to the river. We may not want to do that at all, but in that sense, there's a recreational a goal that we're not even thinking about now, and that's to, paddle into the river, connect the pond to the river. There are consequences for doing that, and the pond changes. And so the recreational opportunities in the pond might be slightly diminished, but others may be expanded. So I think we have a long way to go in discussing sort of the interaction of the solution with these recreational opportunities. That's my point.
Any other comments or thoughts on the recreation component before we move on to the next?
I do.
Go ahead.
So Giroux Park, the existing conditions is actually like a really big improvement for West Concord. Like kind of expecting it to be some long walking trail is a little definitely unrealistic, and I don't think that was ever the intent. So like other things that are recreation include wildlife viewing, bird watching, fishing. If you had a boat launch there, it'd be an amazing spot to go in. If you want to sit there and watch the sunset, I mean, this all counts as recreation. So to somehow imply that Giroux isn't meeting any of those needs or wishes is actually quite false. It's actually offering quite a lot to the community right now, even though it's not even finished.
Which would be nice. So I have a question on, how the recreational opportunities, who maintains, let's say we connect it to the river. Who maintains that path? I know there's like trees now over those areas, like how do we assure that what we're promising people, which is whatever recreation it is,
Whatever
a
choice
boat
you-
launch,
Right.
camping.
So you're really asking the larger
A
question. who
river
maintains
ride
whatever.
down the
Right.
river, how do we assure that that is going to, one, actually happen?
Right.
Like today, you can't do it because there's trees over those paths, and two, how do we assure it moving forward? Like if it's not the Warner's Pond Task Force, we're doing some cleanup this weekend, thank you very much, but who does the bigger things? And where's the, I guess, costs?
Right. So who and how and what?
And what does it cost us? I guess, part of that total project cost, I think it's important to understand.
Okay.
Well, it seemed one part of it, if, for example, if the decision had been to remove the dam and bring it into a more narrow, and we wanted to have a walkway around it, and it was on town conservation land, it's very likely that if the trail is developed, there's a trail committee in town. And they actually do a lot of maintenance. They provide trail stewards, they go out and watch these, it's reported every month. And work is done all the time to keep those trails open. So that would be done through them. And then there's others in the staff who are doing things like cleaning up the areas where there's trees that are down, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that kind of stuff would be picked up, yeah.
So there are trees down.
Yeah.
So I just want to clarify that because
If it's on,
it's not conservation.
not on conservation land, for example.
On the
Giroux.
river, you mean? On the
No,
No, Giroux is not.
Oh, no, not the Giroux, I'm talking.
Oh,
about
I'm sorry.
Like the Shoba Brook, we're talking about, take the dam down and kayak down that river, there's trees there, you can't even
Trees
get
down.
In the
at the
river.
Shoba Brook.
Oh,
that's a great one.
Giant tree, we were talking about.
Yeah,
Okay.
and you cannot possibly
can't.
cross in any kind of
Yeah.
vessel there now.
Go ahead.
Is that
Oh, sorry.
NRC? I mean, who is
So
that?
it's very complicated.
Yeah, okay.
They
Or
have
is
been
it
removed.
ours or-
I know from familiarity that ORS has gotten grants to remove strainers and trees blocking the thing. Complicated, takes time, but it's
Right.
part of the organization's
But we have
mission,
mechanisms.
commitment to recreation.
Yeah.
maintaining
Yeah.
recreational
Okay.
access
I
to
think
rivers.
the
But
question, but still the question about the financial implications
Mhm.
of anything, right? That's been a question all along. It's kind of been on the list.
Right. And I think, Vicky, you mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I think part of what you're suggesting is when we evaluate solutions and think about recreational opportunities, it has to account for the institutional realities of
Mhm.
maintenance and how that happens and what's actually likely
To your point.
to be implemented.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I just wanted to second Keith's upvote for Juro Park. But also, I mean, this ties into recreation, goes back a little bit to our sediment conversation, et cetera. But in terms of our potential alternative futures here, I'd love to have a sense of what the graphics show as sections of open water, even if the river were opened up. And so to pin
I'm
here.
sorry, can you say that part again?
Yeah, so in some of the maps that are shown in the more recent alternatives analysis, they're showed a section of where these sediment maps show the deep section of the pond up in the north section. An area that would still be open water because it's too deep for, you know, for the vegetation to grow through. Even if the dam were removed. So I'd love to understand more about that in terms of our alternatives and in terms of recreational access as we think about how amenities could be built in any scenario. It would be great to have amenities like we've talked about from Juro Park, a dock, a point, a launch point where one could access that, what looks like 5 acres of open water, and then, you know, in a lower water scenario.
So, all right, so it's sort of two parts here, because you're talking about, I think the first part of what you were saying is getting a better sense of what the deep water area would be if the dam were removed.
Right.
Under today's condition.
Right.
Not. in 20
Without dredging. or
Without
anything like
dredging,
that,
right,
just
but
given
just
the
for the dam,
conditions, right.
what would be left in terms of getting a view?
This
of what
map
that-
shows you.
What that would look like.
That's a
Yeah,
5 foot drawdown, it's about a 5 foot dam, so that shows you.
I was wondering about that. So that would be, you have that up there if you want to show it.
Yeah, that's the modeling that was done.
That's with a drawdown,
Yeah.
but Keith's point is that would be about the same as if you remove the dam, it would be about the same,
Pretty similar.
similar.
What page is that?
It's on the right-hand side of your screen.
No, is that it?
15,
Yeah,
15,
that's it,
15.
on the right-hand side. So that's pretty much what you think, Keith? That would be pretty
Well,
much.
the speckles, which are very hard to see, it's not the best
Yeah.
map, that shows that it's upland, so those darker blues they're not even connected, that's the remaining water.
It's unconnected water. as
Yeah,
it's shown
Page
in this.
52.
Right.
It is, yeah.
Hey, the EA report had a really nice artist's conception of what that would look like in their alternatives
Yeah,
report.
but that wasn't really based on the Bethimage view.
But we're
Yeah,
gonna,
but to that, I think is, we have to, there's somewhere stormwater coming from Highway 2, and I think that's there. And that's one of the reasons why it's going so deep.
I think so too.
And I don't know, is at a certain point, that needs to go away, so.
The drainage.
And so I don't know what is in the plan for Highway 2, but that's not, let's say, up to code, that they just dump their stormwater from Highway 2 into that area. So that's one area we have to have on our agenda too. What happens if that stormwater goes away, and also what is the impact on water quality from that stormwater?
And any potential reconstruction or whatever with Route 2.
Yeah, so you get additional water inflow there from, and that's also in a certain way not high quality water, because you get all the oil drips and everything
It's a
from the
direct
car.
discharge.
it's a direct discharge
It's
from
a
the
direct
30
discharge,
inch
not
outfall.
clear.
and I-
No, I know,
Yeah.
I'm familiar with that, but it'd be interesting to learn more about, I guess, what your hypothesis is that stormwater sort of scours that part of the pond. and
Yeah.
gives
That's, no,
that deep
there's
area.
like land forming because of cementation in front of it, and I was just there, the last storm, it's not like white water coming out, it's not, like, I don't think it's doing that.
I would guess that was
Yes.
more of a kettle hole that.
Yeah, it
was
might be a
always a deep-
remnant geologic
deep
feature, I
pond,
don't think
but
that's created by
anyways, it'd be
stormwater, it's
interesting to
12
know.
feet deep.
Hopefully we can keep that deeper
Yeah.
section under any scenario.
Yeah.
And sorry, to insert this to the recreational amenities should, you know, be planned around enjoyment of that open spot of water.
So it sounds like the question is really around what would be the extent of deep water? And also the durability of that deep water if the dam were removed. And that would include, well, what if stormwater outfalls are removed? And whether it might be years before that happens if the town doesn't own the outfall, right? If you don't control it, it could be a long
Can I ask a
thing.
clarification
Yes, go
question?
ahead.
Where does the storm outfall go? Like, is it,
Oh, the blue dot.
is it like literally like right?
It's right about here.
Oh, okay, so it is like literally right where that.
Yeah.
Very close in.
Yeah, yeah. You can see it
Okay,
if you walk along that Giroux.
is that a
Trail.
roll up? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But the water coming into the pond
Yeah,
and
let's
flushing every
picture it.
24 hours would still be coming in from the left side. So let's say you were to cut that off.
Right.
This area is still being flooded with water on a daily basis. And if that's the deepest portion and we're pulling it down, it's not gonna go away from that section, is my understanding, if you cut the water off from the top. Like,
And I
there's
feel
still
like we
water.
need better understanding of
Yeah,
that.
I think that's a
and
question.
the-
That sounds like a question. to
Yeah.
you, but-
Because the depth is still gonna be there whether the water's coming in or not. It's the deepest part,
Right.
no matter what, right?
So Vicky, is it correct that what you're asking is still part and parcel of the question about what deep water areas would be left? If the dam were removed, what,
Right, that's what this is showing.
that's what it's showing.
Is saying the deepest part will always be the deepest part. If the water's coming from the left, it will fill up that area no matter what. You know.
Although,
It's
did
so
this,
small.
Yes.
did this
4.5
consider
acres.
the removal of the outfall?
That's that's the
Okay.
question. I don't
That's
think
the
we know,
question.
because I don't think
Okay.
we modeled that
Okay.
scenario, right?
Got it.
Yeah.
The,
No, no.
the scale at the bottom right-hand corner of that map, that entire segment is 300 feet, and that's about the same width as that dark blue area. So you're talking about more or less one football field's worth of area
Hmm.
that is that deep
Mhm.
out of that whole pond.
Mhm.
It's just
think
so tiny. It's a postage stamp.
I think the alternative
Yes,
now,
it is.
is the recent one
Yes,
spoke
sir.
about 5 acres or.
Yeah.
It's a, it's not just the deepest part.
In the alternatives analysis in appendix A, they have a pretty good map of this, and
You're all,
their estimate of the remaining water would be 4.5 acres.
okay, so folks, hang on a second, because Paul is trying to get it.
So-
Paul, Go ahead.
No, that's what I was gonna say. In that alternatives report, they estimated 4.5 acres. Now that's based on modeling, it's based on bathymetry. That needs confirmation, but that was the estimate at the time.
So given where we are in the evening, I think we're gonna have to stop here to move on to the other topic in the agenda, and we'll continue the conversation about any remaining issues on section 4 on the management goals, and then move into talking about the section 5 issues. You can do that next time.
I mean, who knows, Rachel, maybe no one will have anything to say about this. Come back and
You'll be
finish
on
all
your
of section
own,
4.
my friend, so good luck with that.
All right, so.
I won't be here at the next meeting.
Oh, I see.
I will not be on
Throwing it
vacation. No, I'm on
Right,
vacation next time.
Okay, so we wanted to talk a little bit about, this is kind of related to our next steps as a group. So we think that this is a pretty, clear sort of suggestion, at least at the last meeting, but we want to confirm it with you and talk a little bit about the approach, which is that we could convene, and I think Rachel and I and the co-chairs think that this, could be a helpful next step. A work group, so a small group of the task force to basically look at developing criteria using Envision Concord, and we also spoke last meeting about, other town resources that it would be, justifiable to bring in, especially if they post-date Envision Concord. So the key question to address here would be, how should we apply the Envision Concord criteria to our review of the Warner's Pond alternatives? And just to say, if you did all review the Envision Concord and the alternatives, and the criteria that are named in there, I think, a couple of things that the work group could really help with, right? So in Envision Concord, there's some duplication of ideas. They're organized kind of in different places. This work group kind of bring together the core ideas in one place. There's also, links of those criteria. Not all of them are relevant, right, to what we're talking about. So we can bring in just the most relevant ones. It's also the case that, if you look at the checklist and what's in the document, some issues are in the checklist, but not in the document, not really focused in the document, and vice versa. So kind of just making sure that we're capturing all the relevant issues. Like I just looked through it and for whatever reason, biodiversity doesn't appear in the checklist, but it's mentioned all the time in the document. And I would presume it's something that we care about, right? So just an example. So we're suggesting convening a work group with the mandate that you see on your screen there, which is to specify a clear set of proposed criteria to guide the task force review of alternatives by interpreting the envisioned contract criteria as a shorter, more manageable, and more relevant set of questions. The approach that we suggest is we can take volunteers of who'd like to be in this group, and we want to see who might be interested in a minute, and you can also follow up with us after the meeting. We, as a planning team, are working on a very short guidance document just to kind of show you what a criterion could look like. It's examples of the kinds of sentences or questions you might ask as part of that. So we share that with the work group. It's up to you. You take it for what it is and you ignore it if it's not helpful. That group would meet. It'd be okay for them to review other town documents, as we mentioned. And then they'd come to the next meeting with a proposal, basically sharing with you their work, the list of criteria that they came up with, how they came up with it. I would also just say there's elements of our discussion today that could certainly inform that, right? When we're talking about the goals here, right, for the group. So we can share the minutes of that and the flip charts as well. So anyway, I think the question is just, does it sound okay? Are we on board with this approach for a work group to do this work? Yeah. Okay. And then I would just say, well, I mean, maybe we can resolve this now. I mean, we'll see. And if not, I think our request would be, can you maybe entrust the planning team to help put together a group and make that work,
Make
a
it
balanced
balanced. We
work.
want to have a
right?
balanced group.
Yeah.
It balances everything, and we would want your permission to be able to do that. And in some cases, it may be that volunteers will be weighted too heavily in one direction or the other. We might want to not take them all, and we want the task force to feel comfortable in, giving us that, that authority, or tell us another way that you'd like to do it.
Yeah. But, yeah, Bill, go ahead.
How many people are we
Yeah,
thinking about?
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I would just say it can't be a quorum, right? Because, for open meeting law. But, I think beyond that, like, I would say 2 to 4.
4,
right?
3.
Yeah, yeah.
We're trying to make it so that I think the examples that Toby put together are very helpful in terms of like envisioning what this would look like. And this is the guide to the future. This is the guide to the work. So it really has to be practical and work for you. But yeah, I would think 3 to 4
Yeah, 3 or 4 would be good.
people is plenty.
So, just curious, we don't have to resolve this now, but is there anyone who knows that they'd be interested in being part of this? Yeah, Liz, Malcolm, okay, Vicky, great, okay.
That's 3 right there.
Well, that's 3, and,
Do you have any volunteers online?
yeah, anyone online?
Paul just hit himself.
So Paul, okay, so that could be our group, right? Paul, Malcolm, Vicky, and Liz, are we?
Yeah,
comfortable with
that sounds good.
Okay.
Does that feel, it feels comfortable? for us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just have a question about that. Would it be, so Gary Kleiman was the co-chair of the task force.
Yeah.
And of that subcommittee of the planning board that put together Envision Concord, would that be helpful to have him participate in that conversation if he's available? Because he knows that document backwards and forwards.
So this is okay with the task force? I mean, we could have Gary join the task force. I mean, if he's interested, maybe even come to our next meeting, right? And talk a little bit about that document.
Well, by that time, they'll have already worked.
Right.
I think he comes and talks to us for half
I
an hour.
agree.
before we start.
I
our
agree.
process,
That makes
right?
more sense.
And then we go, and then he leaves and we
Right.
continue.
Yeah.
And if there are things that you hear from him that you think, oh, the whole task
Right.
force
Correct.
should hear this, then you can always make that recommendation.
I agree with that.
But I
That's
have
a great idea.
But I have a question, about, because this is again 6 years old. I'm curious about what you know about more current
Yeah.
vision documents that we should be looking. I know the Recreation Department has one that's in process. What other ones are there that we should be looking at for more current? Because I'm looking at this, I've read through it and it's like, there's nothing about what we just talked about in terms of density of West Concord, of Giroux Park, and all of these things that we are so critical to this discussion.
Yeah.
My sense is that one thing that might be worth looking at is some of the work that's been done around, climate vulnerability assessment, because that's come to the fore quite a bit more in the last few years. There's some discussion about from the Climate Action Committee and updating our sort of goals around greenhouse gases, but I don't see this as being too related to that. So I'd probably skip over that, but that's the municipal vulnerability, and that was a piece of work done largely by staff. Maybe touching base with Eric Sims, and also I think wasn't that led by the fire chief or Walter Ladder?
So that's the vulnerability plan.
Yeah,
And then I think what you're talking about is the climate action plan,
yeah,
which was led by the former Eric Sims.
yeah, okay, so those two might be worth
Yeah.
taking a look at. I can't think of anything more current than that.
No, I mean, for what it's worth,
Mhm.
the Envision Concord document is a bridge to 2030,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't take into
But it's
account,
always, always what you know at the time.
Correct.
History is
Right.
always.
but it was
changing.
meant to be
No,
sort of
agreed.
forward-looking.
But we all,
Right.
we can look and see how correct it was.
Right, exactly.
Right,
Where we are
6
halfway
years
through the
ago
process.
and
Right.
life has
Right.
changed. Yeah. Even
Right.
vulnerability,
Yeah,
climate
well,
change has
yeah,
changed since this was written.
You know,
Yeah,
the rest of
exactly.
what we've learned had mostly to do with the pandemic, which again, I don't
Yeah.
think is that.
What are the housing, is it, the
Yeah,
housing?
the housing
affordable
production
housing?
plan, sets out some goals.
Yeah.
What Chris was alluding to is really true. There's a lot more of it.
Mhm.
Hey, Mark, I have a quick question, a kind of a loaded question. How much would the MCI Concord evolution factor into what we're thinking? Not at all, partly, what are your, I know it's too early to tell, but it's a neighbor.
I think it's pretty significant. I mean, as most of you probably know, we're just spooling up what we're going to do to try to get a strategy around MCI Concord and trying to understand what the state is going to do. Remember, it's really still just a proposal. I mean, the governor can stop operating it, but disposing of the property requires the legislature to agree, and that won't even begin to happen until the next budget is passed. That said, when we think about recreation opportunities, assuming that MCI Concord does happen, it's gonna open up a whole riverbank worth of space, and so where before we had, kind of a small amount of open space along waterways in that immediate vicinity, we may be thinking about larger context. To me, I think when we get around to making our recommendations, the two things that we need to do is sort of entertain the possibility of what happens if there's major land use changes. And also I went back and looked at on the town website, you can see some of the alternatives that were proposed for the Route 2 rotary redesign some years ago, and the Route 2 rotary corridor also, some of that literally would have paved over what we now know as the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. So those aren't gonna happen, but something is almost bound to happen, and we may get a chance to influence some of what that is. So I think we need to always keep in mind that any solutions that we come up with ought to at least contemplate some conditions on that. And that might be another thing that we kind of apply to our criteria. Once we've got the Envision Concord criteria, we might also think about these other factors, is the way I've been thinking about approaching it.
Yeah, I do also, because of the kind of work that I do, I wonder when the developers come to the state with the dollar figure, if they would move a little bit more quickly. That's incredibly I know of many, many developers
Mhm.
outside the state of Massachusetts who are looking at that land, and if somebody says to them,
Right.
here's $100 million check, it might move things faster.
Mhm.
That's interesting.
Okay.
Good, all right, so it'll be the working group, what are we gonna call you? What shall we call it?
Vision Concord
Envision-
criteria.
Vision Concord Criteria Work Group.
Yep.
We will leave it in your hands to find a time to get together and review the document or do whatever other research you want to do and come to the April 11th meeting with a proposal for the group to consider, rather to discuss. So we're getting close to the end here. So the next meeting is April 11th from 5 to 7. I don't know, do we have a location decided where you want to meet?
Why don't we ask that question?
Yeah, I agree, that's that.
Yeah, I mean,
We were thinking about going back and forth, does that sound good, or do you wanna?
I like the idea of going back and
Yeah,
forth, because it brings it
Oh.
into both sides of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just as long as, because I am at the Harvey Wheeler. that's
Oh.
why I was like, the lot is awfully empty right now. So if there's some way to like, I know it's in the agenda, but like.
Put it in red.
Yeah. Or update the appointments or something.
Yeah, might have it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We also talked about going to the pond and looking at it together.
Sure.
I don't know if we
Yeah.
wanna meet there first or another time, or how do we wanna handle that?
I think that's important as well. And I think sooner rather than later, because maybe we want to look at it, now at this point in time and maybe in the summertime.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a one and done.
It
type
might be
thing.
easier to call that a site visit because
Yes,
there's a lot less sort of meeting overhead associated with just, so the understanding there would be we're not deliberating or really talking about it, we're going out and getting a look.
Visualize.
Well, if you were planning to come on May 4th to the scout
Yes.
ceremony, you could combine it, do it all on that
Or
day.
before the next meeting, I was kind of.
And it would be great either, with your Delia or staff or Jeff, to have access to the cornfields on the west side of the pond. Which are Department of Corrections land, just
Yeah.
have us all eyeball that.
Without being shot.
yeah.
We won't shoot,
don't worry.
Why don't we propose some dates for a site visit? And it may be two groups that go out instead of one group, that might be just as well, because there won't be a quorum of any of us at any point. So why don't we propose some dates for the group?
Planning team can do that.
Yeah, we can propose some site visits.
We have a work plan we've been working on. It's a little bit of a working document. It's something I think we're intending to share with you all when ready, but I think we can talk about this as part of that conversation and share it with you.
So we will, so the next meeting will be April 11th at Harvey Wheeler, 5 to 7 PM. We will send you out more readings and minutes, and we will continue the conversation about the 2012 report at the next meeting, and then also hear back from the Envision Concord Working Group on their work. There'll be a meeting feedback form going out from us, and we need to turn this over to public comment now.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I guess this is my turn to say, if anyone's interested, who, here in the room or on our video, in a public comment, we're opening it up. As you know, you heard already, I know you'll do this to be respectful in your comments, avoid personal attacks. Keep your comments to no more than 2 minutes. And then we'll move on from there. So anyone want to speak?
I do, but I gotta wait till my phone comes back up, because I didn't want it to run out and I have my notes on it.
We'll come back to you then, Jimmy. You have a few more minutes, yeah. Anybody else? Yep.
I was just gonna say, I.
Should we
appreciate-
probably do it again. We should identify,
Around,
yeah.
500.
No, Chris, yeah.
I appreciate your putting, the documents you're gonna be discussing in the agenda at least, so that we know what documents it is that you're discussing. You did it this week, and I appreciate it going forward in the future.
Great.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, here we are, yeah. Please, yes.
Oh, Anna Feldwig, 343 Commonwealth Avenue. I just want to say that there is actually a group interested in reviving the stewardship committee. So there is a lot of public interest. There's a whole new set of people around. And we did offer to do that in the spring, but we were discouraged from doing it.
All right, we'll keep that in mind. That's good. Thank you. Anybody else? Jimmy, all right, we're finally met.
A couple things. One is.
Oh, Jimmy's trying, for everybody.
Oh, sorry, 303 Commonwealth Ave. I'm in a butter.
Jimmy Two Feathers, that's right.
And I've watched the pond for about 35 years, every single day. What I want to say is that the north side of the island, you know, I watched it, it seems like it's getting really shallow there because that's the opposite side of the pond where the current is.
Mhm.
And it's filling in, and I've gone through there now and it's up and up. The mention of the turtles, the snapping turtles, eastern painted turtles. The issue with the eastern painted turtles for me was when the realtor was going through, they promised a green fence there. Because the eastern painted turtle is not protected. But where they lay their eggs on a south slope, sunny, is protected, and that's where they hatch out, where now Giroux Park is. So I still we need some mitigation there, because if not all else fails, then I'm gonna go to the state to say this area needs to be protected. I'm a self-taught herpetologist. The eastern painted turtles are common. There was a sighting of a Blandings turtle way off over on the other side towards where the cornfields are, but we have Brian Windmiller, and I haven't been able to suss that out. The snapping turtles I have not seen in the last 3 years, because what happens is they come up into the boat area and make a nest, and so do the painted turtles. And what I've done in past years is I've watched the females lay the eggs and come back and scoop the nest up and then head start it. And then let the turtles go because they have a gyro compass and they know where to go. And I'm trying to tell them, why don't you guys lay eggs on the island? Because the skunks are wiping out 95% of all eggs.
Oh, yeah.
Because the day they lay the eggs and the skunk come at night, so dig them up. And so many times I've almost cried where I thought it was maybe a nest and I wasn't sure. The next morning I go look and it's all dug up.
Well,
The other piece is, for me, is about mitigating some kind of a visual block at Giroux Park, because the thing with the turtles is that they see movement, the females will turn around, go back into the water and drop their eggs in the water. And I've lived there all these years. I also have aerial photographs, which are much more accurate than drawing maps of the causeway going through Boy Scout Island. And also there was a road back where, see, what happened is all of those back lots were sold, the town sold them out to the people who were abutters. My house was the people who owned it at the time were the only ones that didn't buy the back lot, and that's why the boat area launches, even though I'm technically an abutter because I'm a abutter to the boat launch. So that's how that happened. But I do have pictures. There used to be a road that used to run parallel to Comm Ave along the pond, in back of the houses, going up to the White Widows. So I'm gonna go home and try to find those.
that'd be great.
photographs.
We'd love to see it.
They're much more accurate than somebody's drawn map. It's actually an aerial photograph.
Great, really good. Any other comments? Chris, back to you.
Okay, well, with no further business in front of the task force, then I am adjourning the meeting at
I'm sorry, real important, I forgot. Linda Coombs, who is at Wampanoag, I'm in Wampanoag. There is a program, and I can send a link to somebody about the dam issues down the Cape and how they've impacted and what they're doing about it. It's very interesting because the indigenous perspective that she puts out is not about so much about just preserving things. It's about, well, how do we keep things in a natural way, considering the environment has changed so much over the last 100 years.
Good.
It's a 2-part program, and it was just produced last September and October, so it's very relevant.
I think our process, Jimmy, is to send it to our facilitators.
Yeah, send it to any of us, yeah.
It gives an indigenous perspective
Good.
of dam removal.
Great.
perfect, thank you.
Anyone else? All right.
Okay, so then, I guess with no further business in front of the task force, then I'm adjourning the meeting at 6:54.
Thank you.